Thanks for listening to the Underdog podcast presented by the Riley Decker Companies. Please do us a favor and help us change and improve lives by subscribing and giving us a rating on the platform of your choice. Thank you. We have a special guest today, Mr. Ryan Russell. Welcome to the Underdog podcast.
Hey, thank you.
Usually we're maybe sitting in Florida or State College having a beer or coffee nowadays via Zoom, but nonetheless, man, glad to have you on the UDP.
No, excited to tell the story, man. This is amazing. I absolutely love what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that means the world to me as well. I was looking at this when you said tenured at age 30 at Penn State. I was like, there's people in college that might be in their undergrad still while you're a tenured professor. So that's, incredible accomplishment. And then you launched 20 over 10 in 2014, and then it was acquired, I believe, in 16?
No, it was acquired in 2020.
Or in 2020, sorry there. But nonetheless, created a great company, top in the brand and identity design industry, just incredible stuff, Ryan. You're doing with the academia piece and also in business. And then on the family side, you got a great wife, Samantha. You got 3 kids. And then, this last April, Ryan, wanted to talk about, as you had said, I think you're quoted as, I'm going to be upfront that I consider myself a lucky person. I've been blessed to be surrounded with incredible people, incredible experiences, and have accomplished some incredible things. And things got put in perspective, things in life, as I just mentioned, you're killing it in life. And then all of a sudden, you find something in this April day. Can you kind of go back, anything I missed in your life, and then kind of what happened that April?
Yeah. No, it's a really good summary. I've been, let me start off by saying this, right? Because I think to put that quote in context, right? Like, I used to pre-April tell people I'm the luckiest person in the world, truly, and I believe that, right? And I started saying that, probably right after 20 over 10, the company that I founded was acquired. Fast forward to April, and April 28th, arguably the worst day of my entire life, right? I go in for an MRI. And, the outcome is worst possible outcome that you can get. Right. So, I get, sort of through this process all the way through a craniotomy. This is brain surgery. Right. So I'm, through radiation, like this baldness isn't by choice. But here's the thing, man. What's today? Today is August 21st. I still believe that I'm the luckiest person in the world. Like truly, right? Even with this really terrible prognosis. And I'll kind of walk through that a little bit, but I think a lot of people think that like I used to say that. And then like after that April day, like I was like, oh, maybe I jinxed it or something. No, I'll double down and say, absolutely. Like, I think there's nobody luckier than me. But just to put everything in perspective, kind of leading up to this. Kyle's right. Like, I've been really lucky to have my feet in a couple different industries, like academia, for example. I started teaching at Penn State when I was 24 years old. I was on tenure track and then became a tenured associate professor at 30, right? Really great outcomes, really great people around me, a really great mentor at Penn State University, right? A really great Research One institution. But I've also worked in the private industry in multiple facets as well. So 20 over 10 was a marketing platform specifically to fintech, so financial services. And we really built that up. We were producing at scale, right? So for thousands of people, websites, social media marketing, you name it. I mean, really, really kind of broad. Let's see. That was acquired in October of 2020. I did some consulting there. For those that don't know, my wife, Samantha Russell, huge in the fintech space right now, was actually the CMO for 20 over 10. And she cycled over, and the company that acquired us, FMG Suite, She ended up coming on board with them to take over as what's called the chief evangelist, which is sort of like a CMO. And she still works with them today. So I consult with them, but I don't actually hold a permanent position there. And, it's really funny because, as we were kind of going through these and all these kind of professional accolades were happening, one of the things, Kyle, I got to tell you is like, all of these goals, like these were goals, right, of mine was, big acquisitions and tenure and all these things. But what was happening, and I just didn't realize, was like, I was sort of ramping up, accomplishing a lot. I wasn't getting any happier. I was actually getting less happy. Right. And what was happening was I wasn't celebrating any of this. Like, it was like, it would happen. And then it was like on to the next thing. It was like, let's see what other mountain we can conquer, And so like, I used to do a thing where like, I wasn't even celebrating birthdays. Like, it was just on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And then, I was sitting in my living room a few months before that fateful April day. And I remember turning to Sam and being like, man, I need another hill to climb. Like, my leg was bouncing. Like, I was looking for something, it was like, what are we doing? Maybe I'll go up for full professor. Maybe it's another company. Maybe it's, and it was really just, I was getting the jitters. But what again was interesting was like, I wasn't any happier. In fact, I was a lot less happy. April 28th rolls around. Now, what I wasn't kind of telling people was, I was suffering these like really rough migraines, right? Really just bad. And I've had migraines for a really long time. Like, I've suffered from them. I've always kept them to myself, like privately, kind of shut down. But a couple of times, like, they were just bad enough that, I'd have to go get like special meds and, stuff to like get them under control. So finally, 3 doctors. The first one's like, maybe it's an inner ear infection. The second one's, hey, maybe it's like holistic, right? We'll sort of bend you and crack you and do all these things and that'll fix it. Finally, the third one was like, listen, we've taken all the easy stuff off the table. We're going to have to send you in for an MRI. And I was like, yeah, no worries, man. Like, it's all good. Go in for an MRI. This is April 28th. I go in that night. It's the last MRI of the day. It's at 8:30 at night. I go in, there's 2 techs in the room, right? They stick me in the tube. 45 minutes later, I come out and the techs aren't there. The radiation oncologist is. And that's where the flags go off. Mm-hmm. And he just says, I'm going to need you to come with me. Can you join me in another room? So he takes me over and he says, listen, this MRI is bad. Like, it's bad. You have what looks like several lesions in your brain, and we don't know what they are. It's very difficult to tell. Now, here's the thing about brain tumors and just sort of cancer in general, right? When you get MRIs or you get these things, right? You look for things in these scans, things called enhancement, right? Enhancement would be like when you go in and they put the stuff in you. Enhancement, like tumors light up. It looks like a Christmas tree. They're really bright, right? Yep. My scan didn't have any of that for whatever reason, right? Again, luckiest person in the world. Okay. No necrosis. What happens with cancer is like cancer cells eat up cells around them. And for whatever reason, right? The tumors that I have aren't doing that. Right. There's a very symbiotic relationship between good cells and bad cells. And then the other thing is they look for increased blood flow. Increased blood flow for tumors to grow mean that there has to be blood that ultimately kind of fuels this. Right. And so I say that to kind of give context is that's why they were like, hey, we don't actually know like what this is. And so it was everything from like, this could be COVID brain, right? MS, or this could be brain tumors. And like, so we're going to go through it. So, I wasn't allowed to go home. They were like, this is bad. We need to life flight you. So I had to stay over at the emergency room. Chopper comes in. They life flight me to University of Penn to basically run tests. Now, the weird thing is I have no symptoms outside of these headaches. Now, when you hear about people with brain tumors, you're hearing about things like strokes, grand mal seizures, really difficult stuff. I mean, really, really hard stuff. I have really bad headaches, right? And not even like so much that like it's causing a problem in terms of like daily activities. So they life flight me to UPenn, and it's just a very kind of odd experience because I'm doing all the coordination tests, everything. And they're like, for all intents and purposes, like, you're perfectly normal and fine, but this MRI says that you're not.
Wow.
Well, they go in and they schedule a craniotomy, which is brain surgery, right? And they go in on the, left side of, what is that? The left parietal lobe of my brain. They pull it out. And ultimately what we find out is it's the worst case scenario, right? Like that little hill that I needed to climb, right? That I was looking for. Nah, man, this was Mount Everest. You know what I mean? This thing is looking to take you out, and we got to do something about it. So that was it. I get the craniotomy on May 3rd, and but believe it or not, though, I was released 26 hours later, passed all the tests, coordination. They were like, we don't know like what's happening. It's just very, very odd. There is a belief now, okay, that makes this a little bit unique, that this is a little bit slower growing, the tumors, because while there's three, they're multifocal. They think they're all connected. If you know anything about brain tumors, what they tell you is that brain tumors sort of like kind of snake through the brain and, kind of grow out. They think that maybe this has been in there for a very, very long time. And that would lead to kind of understanding why there is no enhancement, no necrosis, none of those things that were like sort of the core indicators. And basically from May 5th on, like it was on, it was okay. And then we did the thing. And the first approach was, we're going to get the very best people in our boat. Right? Like, If you ever read Good to Great, like that's the strategy, right? And then we'll figure out where the boat goes. And so we connected with Duke, the Tisch Brain Tumor Center there, and are working with Dr. Friedman. We connected with Dr. Bookvar at Lenox Hill. And for those that don't know, my uncle was a radiation oncologist as well. So he sort of led the charge and was so critical in just sort of understanding what all of this meant. But what I came to find out was this is a very, very sort of confusing path. And if you're somebody that doesn't have those resources, I cannot imagine, right? Like how people feel, right? Like I was lucky enough to have Doug and all the people at Duke, all the people at Lenox Hill. But it led to all these other great things that we're doing now. And so it was on. And so we have, sort of one of the tumors removed. I will say that the large one, so it's right off the center midline and the back is inoperable. And then there's one in the front right, which is not ideal. It can be operated on, sort of if necessary, but we're taking some really big steps to look at alternative therapies. Now, the last thing that I'll say here is regarding kind of the alternative therapies is I think a lot of people are just like, what is that? Like sage and like all of this kind of other stuff. No, what we're talking about is immunotherapies. And a lot of the stuff that's happening in immunotherapies is actually happening overseas. So we connected with a company called CEGAT, CEGAT, who has an approved treatment as of October, November 21 for a cancer vaccine. And that is absolutely wild. And, I've connected now, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, in a little bit, but with hundreds of people at this point who they themselves or loved ones have been diagnosed with, a grade 3 or grade 4 glioblastoma and are just looking for help, for resources, just to better understand the path that they're on. And if there are opportunities beyond standard of care. Standard of care is your radiation and chemo, right? That's sort of your go-to. Yeah. And so we actually have engaged with CGAT. They have the tissue samples. They are now doing a breakdown of all the genetic markers that are unique to me. And so the weird thing I should say too about this kind of vaccine is it is unique. So when we think about like COVID vaccines, it's like one vaccine, it can go out to everybody.
Right.
If you were to take the vaccine that they're making now for me or for anybody that CGAT's working with, you can't just pass it off to another person because it's very hyper specific to that genetic breakdown of the tumor. And it takes a while, right? So it's 3.5 weeks just to get that genetic breakdown. It's then another 3.5 months for them to actually make the vaccine. And so the plan is we're gonna head to Tübingen, Germany, in late December or early January to get our initial dose. And then we will be returning there every 4 weeks to get boosters. And we'll do that for probably about a year, and then kind of evaluate along the way, sort of the response. And again, nothing ever goes as planned, like, this, right? And so we sort of figure out our path forward from there. But it's about adaptability. Like that's it, right? So nothing ever goes kind of as expected. So that's sort of a very high level approach, but hopefully detailed enough to kind of give you a sense.
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I think the one thing, Ryan, you and Sam, I think, looking back at her LinkedIn posts, like millions of views and likes. And I think, like, you talk about the boat, right? You talk about the support, family, friends, and now all of a sudden you have this national awareness, which I think is great. Appreciate you coming on here to spread more awareness of what's going on. And, like you said, how can you help others maybe that are in the situation that don't have the resources that maybe you have? But can you go back to that boat, the extended boat, I guess, outside of family and Sam, but what you've seen with the support? And then you were on today.com, right? On the show, but on the website, spreading awareness. Incredible article. Those that get a chance, just Google Ryan Russell today, and it's a great article talking about what he just kind of verbalized and even some more detail, which we'll talk about. Can you talk about, I guess, that support, when the national spotlight hit, also what happened when Sam posted that, just everyone, trying to help the community, the good, because we talk about all the bad, right? I mean, it can be so negative, in the world, as we know, with everything going on. But now all of a sudden there's Ryan Russell in the midst of finding the most adverse point of his life, a whole world, really helping you, right?
Yeah. It's overwhelming. I mean, I'm going to be honest, man. It brought me to tears. Like I looked at Sam one night in bed and was just like, I don't think I am capable of giving back this level of energy and support to we're talking hundreds of thousands, millions of views, and that was really tough. I mean, this sounds weird because, like, I'm a very vocal person. I speak publicly a lot. I'm in like a lot of different arenas, but one of the things that I actually have a really hard time with is talking about sort of the challenges personally, right? In sort of a public forum. Well, one of the things that came up was, at the very beginning of this. Now I should mention, and this is tough to say out loud, but I take it as a personal challenge. Is there is no cure for this right now, yet, right? And so with that in mind, this is a pretty brutal diagnosis, and so this kind of comes up, and we start immediately looking at different clinical trials, different, sort of treatments and immunotherapies, and all of this is overseas. That original post that my wife Samantha put out, and Sam has been like the absolute like captain of this ship, right? I mean, she has like put her head down and just steamrolled anything that like stands in our way, especially in those beginning months where I was like just sort of like, healing and kind of getting together. We were looking at two. There was, some treatments going on that were oncolytic, so that, it's sort of gene editing that they do for viral therapies, and the original post went out because one of those was happening in Japan, and we were looking for help with translators and sort of how to facilitate that, because we have to move very, very fast. And I'll never forget. Sam was like, "How do you feel about me putting this out into the world?" And I was like, "Nope, like no chance." And she was like, "It's too bad. I published it already." And it was, and if you know Sam, which you do,
right.
pal, like, you're just like, "Well, why did you ask?" Like, you knew what you were going to do. But it was tough, man. And, I think for me, why it was tough is because like I said, I keep going back, like, this is a really brutal diagnosis. I am determined, and still am, cancer will not be my whole book, like, period. It gets a chapter, don't get me wrong. And when I beat this and when I figure out a way, right, like maybe it'll get two, but that's it, right? Like, we've done too much great stuff. There's too much great people to dedicate the entire book to it. Like, I won't give it that satisfaction. But Sam's been critical. So with that, and just being like, her and I have been so well connected in a couple different industries, is the amount of people who reached out. And when I say these numbers, like hundreds of thousands of people, right? Like, that's such a massive amount. Like, to this day, there are some that we still haven't been able to respond to because the numbers are just so large, has been like, almost crushing. Like, it'll bring you to tears, because these are people that are giving their own resources, their own connections, their own contacts, without any expectation of anything in return. Some of like the very best. And so, like, when you look into people, it's impossible to not see the good, right? And just how incredible. These are professionals. These are the people of some of the largest financial firms in the world. Like, these are people in charge of some of the largest, like, tech platforms in the world, that have poured in their own time and resources to come to us and say, "Here's who you need to talk to. Here's what you need to do. Here are some of the rules for travel. Here are some of the considerations for, passports and entry into the country. Here's how you manage, like, COVID protocols in various, in various ways in various countries." And it's just crushing. And I think, that experience actually really drove kind of, us to say, like, all right, we need to put our own foot to the floor, right? And really, like, press the gas, and we need to put together a resource. Because the other thing I hadn't mentioned is, brain tumors, specifically glioblastoma, affects 13,000 people a year, right, in the United States. And that sounds like a big number, but it's not when you think of cancer, right? Like, that's a nothing, like, that's a fat zero. And so there's, a lot of challenges getting, like, adequate research and funding to it and all of these things. And so Sam and I now, like, once I got back on my feet, and, we really dedicated ourselves to the cause, right? And we started blogging about our experience. One of the things that happened, which was so incredible, was I started blogging about this, all the updates. And my whole thing is just like, listen, stay positive, right? Yep. We're going to beat this. Right. And I want to be clear about that, right? Like, my goal is not to, have somebody talking about me in the past tense, right, in a few years. Like, my goal is, in 10 years from today, you and I are going to sit down and we're going to be like, how did it happen? And we're going to outline exactly the path that we took. And listen, there's going to be lots of steps, and it's not going to be easy, but, like, I will never back down from this, ever. And then 10 years after that, and then 10 years, and we're just going to keep checking in.
And just hold on, let me just jump in, because I think people should know this about you is, you're if there's anybody, and I mean this, I'm not saying this because you're here. I mean, I remember going on trips, and you wake up and you're working out, you're doing burpees, and so physically you're one of the most fit guys, hitting here soon, 40 years old. So that's crazy. I feel like we're getting old, man. The body doesn't respond to the burpees and push-ups like it used to. But, if you look at your work and been looking at that recently, like, you have a very powerful brain. Let's just leave, very smart. Obviously, you can communicate, but you can also design. Just look at his body of work and the projects, you and your team have done. I mean, it's just very impressive. and then you take upon your drive and your competitiveness, right? Which, played, high school, and competitively in college and overcame injuries. And, once again, if I think of that, just many things outside of that, but let's just look at the competitive edge, the health, the power of your brain, and just the will to win. If anyone can do it, which you will do it, I can't wait to share this story in saying, you know what, you did kick cancer's ass, and this especially this piece of cancer, so really, once again, just want to throw that out there. So I'm positive because I know you, and I said, if anyone can do it, you can do it. So
it's funny that you bring this up too, because like I will attribute, that background specific in athletics to that. Like, and it's weird. It's sort of like chicken or the egg. What came first? Was it the drive that like brought you to sports, or was it sports that made the drive? And honestly, I don't know the answer, but, I have this thing. So, Kyle can share this. We have a website called My Gray Matters where I document everything. And one of the things that I have on there are these rules, right? And just things that I like kind of put down as I'm going through this, and it's specific, to glioblastoma, but it's not so specific that it doesn't apply like elsewhere to just like anybody dealing with tough times, right? And so I have this thing where, it's like, listen, is it all going to be perfect? No. We're going to fail a lot. But like, hey, my thing is like, listen, we're going to run at this thing head first. And if you stumble and fall, that's okay, man. That's part of the process. Just make sure that you fall forward, right? Because a little bit of progress is still a step in the right direction. And yeah, like Kyle said, I was lucky enough, especially after kind of what happened in high school. I had a really kind of devastating injury to my right shoulder, a separated AC joint. A lot of college recruiters were like, baseball and stuff, stop calling. I mean, anybody who's kind of been through that process knows like the phone stops ringing, those conversations just drop off. It just makes you feel this big, right? Where you're like, you're somebody and you're getting calls every day to like nothing. But what ended up happening from that was I ended up playing college football at a small school, St. Norbert College, SNC, a Division III school. And it was amazing, right? Like they're 37-2, 3 NCAA berths, really great, like, career there. But the other thing too, when we talk about support networks is like, I got to tell you, like a lot of my support networks were the guys that I played with, like still, and these are guys like in the Midwest, right? So, where like at Penn State, a lot of people go to New York, a lot of people in the Midwest tend to go to Chicago and things. And a lot of them are still there and, sort of surrounding areas. And, these guys call me every day, man. Like my college coach calls me every day. He sent me a hat. It's got a big Dragon Slayer thing on it. He calls me to check in. My AD, my athletic director, calls me, Don Maslinski. And I can't tell you like how much I love this and like how much I love these people. Like, and I don't know, some days like you just don't feel like talking and they don't care. Like they're just like, no, like, and they're just up and just like, so when you feel down, it's really important to get I call it a cancer crew. Like you get people around you to support you. Right. In fact, every day that I went in for radiation, I brought somebody with me because I think a big consideration with that too is like, a diagnosis of cancer, anything kind of devastating, like physically, mentally, any sort of disease, right, is it doesn't just affect you, and that was something that somebody told me like on day one was like, just keep in mind, this is going to have a really devastating effect on the people who love you as well. And so my whole thing was like, all right, well, like they don't need to suffer in silence. Like, let's give them a job and they can participate in the healing as well. So like, I would actually have somebody drive me to radiation treatment every day. And it was awesome. Like we would do radiation and then we'd go out to brunch, and that was the thing. And it was cool because, and I felt super loved after this was like, they'd start fighting about like whose day it was, and so you're just like, yeah, you guys work it out. And then, and you're just like secretly loving it. You're just, yeah. But
Can you go over the, I know that was, you talk about the Cancer Cruise #2, the 6 things. I think it's like you said, it's not just, some of this is, just in general, people can translate into any adversity. You have the 90-10 rule. And I'll let you then get a cancer crew, prioritize rest, reframe the diagnosis, find someone to talk to, and make plans for the future. Can you kind of, in those, and we'll definitely put a link to the website, My Gray Matters, which is just, once again, fantastic content and super resourceful. But can you kind of high level maybe go over, the others that are on your list?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I keep adding to this, but these are things that just kind of pop into my head, and these are purely experience based. The first one, right? And this is the biggest one in my opinion. And this is called the 90-10 rule. The 90-10 rule simply means it is not your responsibility when you're given a diagnosis, right, to be happy and positive all of the time. And I think sometimes that's where people kind of misread me, like where I'm coming at this from this really sort of like high level, like, let's go get them. Listen, 10% of the time, it's very dark, right? And I think, like, I just want to be honest with people. That 90-10 rule, by the way, can vary, right? So it could be 50-50. It's really up to you. It's really up to the person. But ultimately, you want to be positive more than you want to be negative. But listen, if there is negativity there, that's okay. Like, you shouldn't be ashamed of that. You should sit with it. You should process it, right? Don't try to push that down. For me, I had a really tough time being positive like 100% of the time with this prognosis, and I would just kind of separate a little bit and kind of sit with those really kind of dark moments where you're kind of dealing with like a pretty difficult thing. So that 90-10 rule, I think, is really good. Your job is, to when you're in that 10 or whatever that sort of, percentage is for you, listen, your responsibility is sit with it, process it. But your job, remember, is to get back into the 90, because you got to prepare to fight again. Right. So that's like a hugely important one. I keep that as like sort of my biggest. The get a cancer crew, right? Like I said, this diagnosis is going to affect more than just you, and your cancer crew, right, is really going to feed you the positivity that you need to fight, right? They're as important as the food that you eat, right, for fuel, because like emotionally, they're going to pick you up when you're down. And that's going to happen. Like, and again, I just want to tell people it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly okay. Prioritize.
I might have got it just really on number 2. I think I called him a young Bruce Willis before we started recording. I might have got kicked off your crew already. Hey, Kyle, how you doing? You're off. You're off. You just called me Bruce Willis. Yeah, no.
Yeah, there's a couple other people I think like you could have compared me to, and I would have been like, told Sam, been like, hey, can you get Kyle off the mailing list, please? Like, just get him off. No. It's all good, man. I love it. The number 3 is a really big one, and I'm just going to tell you, like, I learned this one the hard way. And number 3 is prioritize rest. I say rest is an additive process, not a subtractive one, because I think, especially coming from like an athletic background and from like, somebody who has a lot of drive and sort of like in sort of the work background, rest seems like time not well spent, right? Or at least that's kind of how it's been framed before. And what I can tell you is that's categorically false, right, especially when you're dealing with cancer, because for reference, I just completed, as of last Monday, 33 days of radiation. And I also do something called Avastin biweekly. Well, the thing about that is it takes a lot out of you. But as an athlete, you've always been taught, like, just keep going.
Yep.
And so, there were days where I would just push through, like I bike on a stationary right now, like 8 miles in the morning, and then do a lift. Right. And it was just keep going. Well, what you don't realize is radiation, when they do these things and your cells are trying to reproduce, your body has to do a tremendous amount of work processing, all of those dead cells out as well. And I'll never forget, man, my youngest son, who is now 8 months old, he was 7 months at the time. This would have been maybe 3 weeks in. I was just like exhausted. And my wife was like, hey, come push Teddy on the swing. And I looked at her and I was just like, it was like 6 p.m. I was like, I don't think I can. Like, I think I need to go to bed. Like, I'm exhausted. Like, this is crap. I've never been this tired before. And I think I went inside. I slept for like 14 hours. Like, it was crazy. Like, that's not me. Like, that's, I'm not a big sleeper anymore like that. but I started talking to people. I started talking to people, family who had been through sort of the cancer journey. And they were like, that's a hard lesson learned, isn't it? Like, you know, one of the things to keep in mind is, you know, prioritize rest so that your body can continue to fight at that optimal level. And yeah, that was tough. You know, you can't work out like an athlete anymore. You have to work out like somebody who's fighting a disease.
Right.
And that's where you're coming from. So we're doing it. Number 4, reframe the diagnosis, right? Listen, I'm going to go back to like, you know, Kyle spoke, get right people on the boat. We're going to reframe this diagnosis. Anybody who looks at this diagnosis as the end is not welcome on my boat. They're not welcome in my cancer crew. I don't want them around me. I don't need that kind of negativity. Because listen, if they're right, okay, but I'm going to prove them wrong, right? And that's what I'm going to do. So we're going to reframe this diagnosis. This diagnosis is not the end. This diagnosis is the beginning. And what this beginning allows us to do is reframe all of our priorities too. Here's a weird thing, and this is where you're going to be like, what in the hell? I will tell you now, since May 5th, the day I got home back to State College, Pennsylvania, have been the best days I've ever had. Full stop. Right? I now know the diagnosis that I have. I'm now going through treatments. I am so excited every day to get to the end of that day. I'm spending like an incredible amount of time with like my family, my kids, my friends. I'm coaching sports, you know, all kinds of stuff. And it's just prioritizing all the things that I want to do. Even in work, it's like I'm prioritizing the projects that I want to do, right? It's really easy to say to no to stuff now, where before it wasn't. I was like a people pleaser, so I really wanted to help, and I really thought that way. But you know, that's a big deal as well. Number 5 is like find someone to talk to, and this can take a lot of different forms, right? That can be, you know, I always say like it should be somebody who's objective. So like a loved one isn't ideal in this situation, because I think you're going to have a lot of moments that are really tough to hear, where you're sort of talking about it, right? Where you're in the 10, and it's pretty dark, and they can kind of process. So if it's a psychologist, that's great. Somebody, you know, if you have access to those resources, I think that's really incredible. I talked to somebody by the name of Dean Schrock, and he focuses really, really hard on the mind-body connection and this idea of like positive visual imagery. And like anybody who's been an athlete knows about positive visual imagery. And this has been huge for me. I talk to him 3 days a week. And he is quite honestly the most incredible person I've ever met. Super calm, lives out in Oregon. I've actually known him for a very long time. He worked with my uncle years and years ago. That's how I got connected with him. And Dean is just the most calming spirit. And so even when I come to him in these moments that are in the 10, these really dark moments, I mean, he's unflappable. Truly, like he just sits and it's just, and he listens, and he helps me process through. He doesn't give me answers, but he certainly guides me to be able to find them. And so, you know, it's things like, you know, meditation, positive visual imagery. I mean, even like the tools that you need, because I think, you know, one of the things that I heard was, hey, listen, like if you have cancer, when you get radiation, it's a really lonely time. You're in a room by yourself for a little bit, 15, 20 minutes while they do this. Now, one of the things that maybe you don't know about brain cancer is like, you know, they have to sort of strap you to the table. But when it's brain cancer, they put a mask over you, and you're bolted down basically, you know, by a mesh. It's a really jarring experience. So having these tools kind of at your disposal in advance and knowing kind of what's coming is really, really great. So you can do that positive mental imagery. You have sort of the tools to be able to process those feelings of sort of panic and anxiety, and things. And then the last one is make plans for the future. Like, again, I'm going to point to number 6 as an extension of number 4, right? Like reframing the diagnosis. Like, yeah, you know, you're right. This ain't the end. This is the beginning. So what are we going to do? right? Like Sam and I love to travel, international is like our jam. And one of the things that, I got really scared about was like, I was like, is that the end? Like, for me, sort of in general, but like also like, as I go through these treatments, what about like, so we can't do any international travel anymore. We can't travel at all. And Sam was like, no, hell no. Like, let's plan around it. Right. So we'll be in Germany every 4 weeks. Like, that's crazy. Sam sent me like all the stuff around Germany. Like, she was just like, we could take a train to Switzerland, all kinds of crazy stuff. And like, even around here, I mean, we've prioritized like travel and activities around State College all summer. And it's just stuff to look forward to, because the truth is, this is something that one of the doctors said to me, was like, you got to live like you're going to live.
Yep.
So keep planning, have something to look forward to. And with all that in mind, I got to tell you, I feel great, truly. Like, I feel physically really good. And I know, listen, I'm super lucky. I don't have, the sort of devastating, symptoms that others are for whatever reason. But I'm going to take this as an opportunity to find a way forward and keep putting it out into the world so that others know, right? And they can kind of follow the path too, because we're going to figure it out.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing those 6 things, and just, hearing you reprioritize like what's important in life, and watching you and the family, take those trips and live the moment. And it's really made me think, press pause and, evaluate some of my priorities, and like, man, or it's travel with work, or if it's, whatever the case may be, like you said, you have a different lens, and I've been trying to, listen and read the blogs and just listen in general, or watch the things you guys post. And it's like, man, it is, it's life is fragile, and sometimes you take it for granted, but you've kind of brought that, live the moment, and max out, and not, you say no more putting off till tomorrow, because we don't know what tomorrow is.
Yeah.
And obviously in April that turned from you. And, but yeah, man, I'm glad you're feeling well. You look good. I'm sure you'd beat me in, still weightlifting or running, or, whatever sport you throw out there, you're probably beating Russell over Decker. That's for sure. So
I don't know, man. I don't know. Yeah, it's crazy, man. That priorities. I mean, it's weird because, you come from a place of business, right? And you think about, what does value equal? And this was like a thing that like I missed. This was a big misstep for me, where like money equals, and ultimately it was like financial success, because with financial success, I think comes opportunities, right?
Right.
But like I said, like the thing that I was like having a hard time coming to terms with, like doing really well in a couple different arenas, was like, I was supposed to be getting happier. Like, that was the thing. That was the value. What's happening? And I wasn't. And not only was I not getting happier, I was getting less happy. I was getting more stressed, more anxious. And then this happened. And then I found out that I got that equation, like not just like slightly wrong, like it was way wrong. Like, value wasn't financial success. Value was time, right? Time to prioritize the people, the things that I wanted to do that gave me that happiness. And so like, I can tell you, as somebody who absolutely hates failure, right? And that's been a driving, sort of theme in my life, is I failed there. That was a big misstep for me, right? But on May 5th, I was able to like recalibrate and be like, all right, like, noted, right? I get it. Time. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to prioritize the people, the places, the things, the projects, the business that we love.
Yep.
Not that we just feel like are going to add, more to bank accounts or to, accolades and things. It was, trying to find the opportunity to get more time with those real high value items.
Yeah, no, it's unbelievable. Hopefully you'll be in Germany checking out, and I'm sure Sam will have you on checking out some good stuff, and we'll definitely be following. Is there anything else, Ryan? I mean, this is incredible. Like I said, we'll definitely share everything out there, and as you say, the disease can affect anyone at any age, and comes with a tough prognosis. And being 39, about to turn 40 with 3 kids, I know if any, you have the mental. I think that's so big that I've learned. We had another guest that had a cancer diagnosis, and they talk about the mental piece of the emotional. I think the mental and emotional is something I didn't realize until talking to Tim Kites, his name, and now and Ryan Russell is just the impact of the strength of your mind in this battle. And it sounds like, and then obviously the physical rest. So, and yeah. I know you, I don't think, I think you're not a sleeper. So I think I always slept in on the weekend houses longer than Ryan. He's up with coffee and trying to get his workout in, which I love. Pace setter, man. So I know, no, these are great things. Anything else about Migraine Matters? We'll share the link. Is there anything else that you see as the future of spreading awareness for this disease?
Yeah, so there's a couple things we're doing now with Migraine Matters. So it's a really broad page. It's getting broader. We're sort of working really hard. Kyle we'll post the link, and certainly we blog on the homepage about sort of all of these like important updates, and we talk about the story. We just launched a resources page there that talks about anything from the sort of where to find more information about clinical trials that are available. We have links to resources regarding immunotherapy, and then general resources too for anybody. Now, these are certainly for brain cancer, but this is really, for anything too. So these resources are much broader. So cancer in general. So even if it's not glioblastoma, even if it's not brain cancer, you can go there. One of the other things we're going to be doing is a big initiative for a research funding push. And Samantha and I are dedicated to doing a price match. So we're going to be probably launching that on the Migraine Matters sites in the coming weeks. We're just trying to vet some of the organizations that we're really looking to support and really care about. So stay tuned, because we're going to keep running at this thing full steam, and we're not going to slow down. We're going to keep speeding up.
Yeah, well, I can't wait, man, to follow you, because 10 years from now, Ohio State will still be beating Penn State. Just saying.
I know. Yeah.
But no, I can't wait to see you here in the near future. And thank you for sharing. I know I'm sure it's not easy, as you said, but now that you've opened it up, you are impacting, saving, changing lives. That's what our goal is, to at least change one life each episode. And your story here, Ryan, I'm proud of you. I'm on the positive bus boat, and I'm part of the cancer crew, and going to be a warrior there with you. So whatever you need, just let me know, and appreciate you sharing your story.
I love you, buddy. I likewise too. And I mean that like sincerely. You're absolutely crushing it. This podcast is incredible. And it's a lot more than one per episode. I'll tell you that much. You know what I mean?
Well, I appreciate it. I know I was nervous up front, man. It was a little different for me, just, because you just don't know how to approach some of these situations, but you've helped me, especially because I have a personal relationship. And so I was really, really excited and appreciative. And I was like, this is just something I really wanted to do. And I'm glad you were willing to do it. So thanks again.
Awesome, man.
Thanks for listening to the Underdog Podcast. Please subscribe and rate our podcast on the Apple and Google podcast apps. Leave a 5-star rating and send our Twitter handle a screenshot of your rating at Underdog Pod with your shirt size for a chance to win a free t-shirt. See you next week on the UDP.